Hello, Vertex, and welcome to a very special episode of Painted in Color. I'm co-host Lauren Brown, joined here by co-host Mia Araujo, Eric Wilkerson, and Esther Wu. Today, we're here to talk about diversity in the fantasy industry and have a conversation about what that means for us and our experiences in the industry. So to get started, just want to kind of have everybody introduce themselves. So let's start with you, Mia.
Hi, I'm Mia Araujo. I'm a fantasy artist and writer. I've been exhibiting my work mostly in galleries for the past 14 years, also online and at conventions, just creating my own stories and worlds. And I'm currently writing and illustrating my first illustrated novel.
Awesome. Eric.
Hi, my name is Eric Wilkerson. I am a sci-fi fantasy illustrator and children's book artist, an author. I have been doing work for a variety of different studios, both in-house and freelance from home for about 20 years now. Wow. And currently working for clients like Wizards of the Coast, Scholastic Books, Disney, a variety of different places. But my kind of calling card right now is painting Black kids having sci-fi fantasy adventures. That's kind of like that's my stamp on on the world right now. And it was something I was always afraid to do until I took that chance, and it has been a worthwhile risk. So there you go.
That's awesome. Esther.
Hey, and I'm Esther. I started off in games as a concept artist, now doing biz dev for animation, having worked for Netflix and Skydance and etc. And I primarily do environment concept props. Then I did a little bit of characters, so now I can fully say I'm a generalist, jack of all trades, not good at any one. But no one needs to know that.
We're not true.
Yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell. I love New York and Mex.
Nice. And I'm Lauren Brown. I am an illustrator and art director currently living in Austin, Texas. I started my journey in the animation industry working on shows such as Archer, always having in Philadelphia, The League, then moved to Austin to work at EA, then Zynga, and then currently Wild Seed Games. And so I'm an art director there, but I have an Etsy store. I am a very busy person. And mainly my illustration is focused on whimsy and nouveau, and also women of color and Black women getting to be badass. So it's basically my body of work. So let's get started. Let's see. I kind of want to know just generally how our experiences have influenced our artwork in terms of our personal lives and how that manifests in our work. So kind of want to start with you and just like have the conversation from there. Mia.
Oh man, so I'm a first generation immigrant kid. My family's from Argentina, but we lived there when I was little and stuff, but I guess like most of my life I've lived in this country. And so I've always really aware that I'm not really from where my family's from, but also don't quite fit in here either. So I'm also an identical twin. So I've always felt somewhat like my identity's kind of been a big question mark, or it's just not quite fitting in a box of like all the categories, I guess, that we're supposed to, identify ourselves about. And I think that's actually, I didn't realize it growing up, but I think that that's actually what sort of driven me to be interested in just different points of view and all that kind of stuff. And especially when it comes to stories, that I just want to see more points of view than just the mainstream out there, So with all of my work, I guess I'm just always striving to create what I don't see enough of that I really love and what I really want to kind of give life with my work if I can. So that's just kind of been my compass through all of it. But grew up on a lot of fantasy books. Like I loved reading and stuff like that. And I definitely loved cartoons and animated films, and all that stuff was definitely really, influential to my work and my style and stuff like that. But a lot of the stories that were around in the 90s and stuff like that were very like Eurocentric, all white characters, you know. And even when I was in high school and like seeing Lord of the Rings and all that, like these kinds of films and stuff, I was sort of imagining creating more of the same because that's all I was seeing, you know. So I think that it's like after college, it really took a long time for me to really realize that I had to sort of make a change in the kind of content I was consuming in a way for me to not just regurgitate the same stuff that I was being fed, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think just in recent years, I've just made a more concerted effort to really just kind of create that stuff that I've just been wanting to see in the world.
Esther, what about you?
For me, I can definitely, although I was born here, I felt like I was actually more similar to that situation where because my parents immigrated here and were very connected to like the Chinatown areas in New York. I kind of grew up in those like enclaves, or is it enclave? Yes. In those areas and neighborhoods. So like I had what I felt like was a very traditional, like almost like as if, you know, I was in China. Like if I had grown up in China, I had like everything around me was like Chinese. So it didn't really feel like I was like living in like the West, like even just like that. And I could say like a lot of that has really influenced my artwork, like especially as I was saying, you know, one of the things I like painting is like just New York, but I like specifically those like not just like Chinatown areas, but Asian neighborhoods like K-Town and so on and so forth. So I definitely, you know, like there's a certain, you know, like it's just like an experience that you can't really replicate, and it's very hard to pinpoint, you know, because it's in a very specific time period, and you know those neighborhoods also change throughout time and as people move in and out. So I can definitely, yeah, say that how you know, my background and my ethnicity has influenced a lot of my current work. And plus, like actually, I can say recently too, on even on a more spiritual level, like how that relates to art is, you know, like art and your relationship with art is always, you know, something interpersonal, but like
Oh yeah.
it wasn't until like recently that I realized a lot of my early days, just like a lot of Chinese influence wasn't just like folklore. It was actually like there was a lot of like Buddhism, even though my parents were Buddhist per se, but like a lot of things I've watched and like learned about when I was a kid that were all like Chinese that were actually like Buddhism. So it wasn't until like recently I'm just like revisiting all of this, like, whoa, like I can see like a spiritual thread in my art now, which was super surprising because I've always, you know, I've always said I'm an atheist. So then revisiting that was just like, oh, this is intriguing. So that's kind of it about me.
That's awesome. Eric.
Well, when you ask what is my experience been like in life that has influenced my work, I'd say that my introduction to Star Trek as a kid pretty much shaped my view of sci-fi and the future and the kind of stuff that I was interested in, the kind of stuff that I would give my time toward. Seeing a television show on every single week where, you know, we weren't fighting amongst each other, or the humans weren't fighting amongst each other. There was there was diversity. You know, it was just an incredible positive view of the future. And I ate up every second of that. I grew up in upstate, this kind of bubble, of melting pot of upstate New York, where it was just like a huge diverse population, right out of one of those like TV sitcoms or something, like really nothing ever happened there. But I remember always going to the bookstore, looking at the sci-fi novel covers and just envisioning doing that and wanting to learn how to paint so that I could do that. But never seeing myself in the art, never seeing people that look like me in the art. So when it came to like the D&D books and all of that stuff, there was never really any kind of representation. In video games, the same thing. So I quickly gravitated toward, if it wasn't Star Trek or some kind of sci-fi TV show, I gravitated toward comic books and anime. So that was kind of what I grew up on, which influenced every single thing that I paint and draw today. I was heavy into anime, heavy into comic books. I was the kid that would get into full-blown arguments over who would win in a fight between, and damn it, if you said it wasn't Superman that was gonna come out on top, we was fighting. So
it's like Superman or Goku, who's gonna win?
Yeah, it's like there's nobody that you can't beat him. So anyway, but yeah, we would geek out over different comics and stuff like that. But that medium spoke to that larger audience. I mean, they didn't have a whole book that was just all Black characters, or they did for a little while with Milestone Comics, but they at least acknowledged that there were other people on the planet, right? When it came to the superheroes and the villains and things like that. And that was something that wasn't being done in other forms of media. And I mean, arguably, you could still say that that's a problem today. But it's not something that publishers aren't aware of. It's a choice that they make. We don't want that over here. We're not going to publish that because, we have our demographic, we have our target audience, and it's not those brown people. It's not the Asian folks. It's this is who we're aiming this at. And you just have to say, okay, then I guess I'm probably not going to submit my portfolio to you because you might not want it. But that's fine. There's plenty of other people out there that do acknowledge that there are other people on this planet that like sci-fi, fantasy, and have money. So and want to spend it. But yeah, that's me. Hardcore Star Trek and comic book fan, and I paint sci-fi fantasy stuff for a living. So
yeah. And the way that my experience has influenced my artwork is that I likewise with Eric and I guess all of us, I also grew up on anime, cartoons, video games, and just love the experience of just being immersed in this magical world where I could have a complete escape. And things like Sailor Moon, where you could be somebody who transcended your normal form to be a stronger version of yourself. And then obviously the power of friendship, which just resonates, of course. But all of those things have influenced my artwork up to this point. But I've also had the similar experience of not being able to see myself in media and having to kind of inject myself into those narratives because I wasn't seeing it at all. But because I wasn't seeing it, what my early work looked like, even through college, was that a lot of my, characters and figures that I would design weren't Black like I was, because all I had seen in mainstream media up to that point was mostly white protagonists doing really cool things. But the Black protagonists would either be, trying to break out of crime or doing the crime, or, being some kind of mob boss or pimp, or it was just not the kind of representation that was inspiring to me because the representation was so limited. So, getting older, I started to see, a little bit more media that started to kind of represent us a little bit better. And also realizing that I'm like, oh, wait, I am very absent from these spaces and I want to be able to make a difference. And I think one of the defining moments of that was, me freshly out of college, going to Dragon Con for the first time and going through the halls and realizing that all of this fantasy art, everything that was being presented on these shelves in this gallery space was just white characters. And I'm like, we're in, like, this is fantasy. And there's like, you can't even fantasize that there could be a person of color or a Black person in your space. Like, really? And so at that point, I was just like, oh, like, I have to do something about this. Like, I have to, like, even examining my own work, at that point, there were some people of color, but I really didn't go full in. But after that point, I was like, you know what? Like, if there's going to be fantasy art drawn by me, I'm going to draw it with people who look like me, because I don't get to see that anywhere else. And it's really a shame and a loss that we don't get to see that diversity, just because there's so much that you can do with it. There's so many more patterns, cultures, costumes, outfits, like everything that you can use outside of European influences. And they're so interesting. All the patterns of African, like outfitting and fashion, and like, in Latin America and in India, like all of these different things that we often see just injected in these spaces as, a one-off kind of thing of just like, oh, okay, like now we have our Indian set, or now we have our African set. And instead of just making it more ubiquitous, like European aesthetic gets used. And so, like now that I am starting to get more so into my own personal illustration, I want to continue to show that side of what it could look like, and what it could be, because there's a lot of possibility out there. And I feel like you only see 25% of like what that possibility, maybe even less than that, honestly. And yeah, I would love to see that change, because I think it's just so much more interesting. So my art has been transforming for the past 10 years, I think. And, I want to keep it going because I want to make it more colorful, plain and simple. So yeah, can definitely agree with you too, Eric, that like previously a lot of the scope was limited for what publishers would accept. But now that we're kind of more in our careers and we see shifts happening, what is your experience? I just want to know from like everybody, like of seeing, like, do you think there has been a change, and how far have we come, and how much farther do we need to go in terms of representation?
I mean, there's always room for continued growth. I mean, has it changed dramatically from what the industry looked like 20 years ago? Yeah. 10 years ago? Sure. Depending on the market that you're aiming your work at, some still have a little bit more work to do than others. I feel that children's books by far are, they answered the call. They've children's books have for years, decades even, been focused on putting content out there for every child, right? And it's only after that child hits a certain age that things start to get a little segregated, which is weird, right? To think about it like that, but that's the truth.
And even that market has been slowly growing. Like it's still, and there's a survey from 2019, so I don't know how much it's changed in the past 3 years, but like diverse books, there's still only, it increased from 3% to 26%, but there's still obviously a lot of room to grow.
Right. So when it comes to, so for people that don't know, there was a poll done. There's a poll done every 2 or 3 years by a children's book publisher that releases this information on how many diverse books there are in being published worldwide, and the percentages of children of color represented in those books. So it breaks it down specifically, Asian, Pacific Islander, Native American, African American, and then those have been single digits for many years. And then there's animal books. Any book with an animal in it is like 26, 30%. of
They
the
outranked
entire.
the diverse books.
Yeah. So it's like parents are like, I could buy this book about this Black kid learning to, or this Chinese kid learning to do whatever, or having an adventure doing whatever. Or I could buy this book about this bear getting stuck in a hole trying to eat some honey.
Yeah.
Know what I'm going to buy, right? That's it's messed up, but that's the market. And then the rest of it, that other, 80%, 70% of the market is a white kid having an adventure. They're going to the moon. They're doing whatever they want to do. Nobody's telling them that they matter. Nobody has to tell them that they matter. They know, right? But that's children's books.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's other markets that are recognizing that if they tap into certain demographics, they acknowledge that other audiences exist, that it just increases their revenue stream. I mean, it always comes down to money. Yeah. Everything's going to come down to money, but being recognized, having people be able to see themselves, be able to cosplay or whatever, that means so much to so many people. And that's I don't know, that's just the world. But there's still plenty of room for change, for continued growth. And I think that it's going to come from both artists and authors and publishers themselves recognizing, okay, well, we've told this story before, we've done this, we've gone down this road enough. What if we change things up and do something different, do something new? I was reading about Walt Disney Animation recently, and how it took 79 years for them to put a Black character, a human character, in an animated film, right? They'd been using different voice actors for animal movies, but until Atlantis, what was it?
Gita.
Can't remember the name of that movie.
It was Atlantis.
It was Atlantis, Lost Empire.
Yeah.
Dr. Sweet being the first representation of a human Black character, Black male character.
But he was the first one?
First.
So ever?
So we're talking 2001.
Yeah.
How long has Disney Animation been around? Since the 1930s?
Yeah.
So that looks really bad, right? But now we have Encanto, where like you could go buy the whole soundtrack in Spanish if you want right now. And I think that's a big deal. So, they recognize, okay, we could aim this entire movie at an international audience and, have kids. There's so many kids that would cosplay as every single person in that family.
They're already doing it.
And
everybody's got that, that song that shall not be named stuck in their head.
Yeah, we're not talking about him here.
No, we're not.
We're not talking about him.
We don't talk about that song.
We don't talk about him. So we're gonna keep it proper. but yeah, but for every Disney that says, okay, we recognize the past, we're making those changes. We're recognizing that there are people in Colombia, people in Africa, people in Japan that would like to see themselves represented. There are other studios that are like, nah, we're good. We're good. And that's, I don't know. When I think about artists that are putting their portfolios together now, that are in art school, whether it's online or, brick and mortar schools, that are, here's the test. You could, if you're watching this right now, when this video is over, go to ArtStation, go to that front page of ArtStation, count how many people of color you see in the artwork, 3D models, animation, concept art, illustrations you see on the front page of ArtStation. I dare you, find 5. Good luck.
I have 3 right now.
3?
Yeah, which is
Right.
honestly
Good.
pretty good.
Good. I'm impressed.
I only got 3 though.
You
That's
only
all I
got 3. I said 5.
So oops.
maybe they on like page 12. Keep
Oh, well.
scrolling.
Yeah, on the front page, there's 3.
Right.
Of a
So
total of, yeah.
it lets you know like what these students, what these art people that are making the art feel is expected of them to have in their portfolio, and if they deviate from that, is that going to get them work, right? And I think that's unfortunately that's a concern. Like if I start diversifying my portfolio, who's going to want it? But there are some, like I said, there are some markets that they heard the call and they're making changes, and others aren't, but that's a choice.
Yeah.
So.
What have you seen, Mia?
Oh, all of this is making me think of when, there's always that person that says, it's just a movie, it's just a comic, like who cares, And it's like, I hate that, because I feel like they don't realize that for like more homogenous societies that will never interact with people who don't look like them, media is all they have to go on how to treat real people when they do meet them. And it makes such a huge impact, especially for Black, Brown, and Indigenous people, because the way you're treated in real life will be reflected by some of those stereotypes in pretty dire ways that for me, it's like all I've had to deal with is, maybe some offensive stuff, but for other demographics, there's just, it's more of a dire need, this representation. And so I think that's why I'm so passionate about it. And I feel like it affects all of us, from all races, honestly. And it's like, the way I see it is like the stories that we tell about each other are just as important as the stories we tell about ourselves. And it really says a lot about how you see the world. And that's why I think it's so important to look at the content in your art. And when you do, depict people who don't share your background, how do you do that? And I think that that's unfortunately just a conversation that's happening way too late, because when we were in school, we weren't even taught how to paint different skin tones,
Yeah.
In anatomy class, there was probably just like 1 week out of the whole semester where they would teach you how to draw other features that weren't like Anglo features, and now, there's tons of tutorials, all kinds of model, reference and stuff online, which is awesome to see. But if you really wanted to learn that stuff back when we were in school, you really had to go out of your way to do it, So it is really refreshing to see that change slowly happening. But I think that, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes it feels too like on the corporate side that a lot of this is driven out of fear or money, right? As opposed to them really wanting to see this content, And so I guess that's what I would want to see change, is just like a real interest in the creator as opposed to ticking a box,
Mm-hmm.
And are you interested in this creator and what their point of view has to bring to the table because they have a different background from you? Or is it just like you have an expectation of what their story should be that you hear from them? Because I see that side too, where it's just like, if you come from this background, I need to see this kind of story, that is kind of a monolithic story of that particular background. And so anyway, it's just something I've been thinking a lot about. I think it was Guillermo del Toro in one of his interviews was saying that he gets a lot of flack for people saying, oh, the horror genre, it's not like Mexican or some bullshit like that.
It doesn't have to be like, what?
And it's like they have all kinds of stories.
Genre.
Yeah, exactly. They have all kinds of stories in Mexico too, that it's like, you might not have read them or heard them, but it doesn't mean he wouldn't be interested in horror because of his upbringing.
Yeah.
And he was just also saying that it's like, if I never told a story about, Latina characters, that should be okay. And if I do, that should also be okay. It's like my perspective kind of gets filtered into the stories I tell. And that's the part I want to see, is like, just a little bit more support, just beyond just like what's expected from each creator, because then it starts becoming almost like, there's a category in like in authors where it's like all the authors from like Europe or from, the UK or from America. And then there's the world authors, and there's just like representatives from each country, and they all get kind of lumped together, even if their styles have nothing to do with one another. I guess I just want it to go beyond that it's like that people aren't just interested in the stories that we're telling because it hits a diversity box, but it's because, hey, you have a different point of view that I haven't seen before, or I haven't seen as much in the mainstream. And I just want to know what you want to make. If that's a fantasy story, if that's a realistic story or whatever, that should be exciting in and of itself. At least it is for me.
What about you, Esther? What have you seen and observed in the industry?
Definitely like all the above said. From my I guess experience being Asian American / Chinese American, like seeing that one as growing up in America and learning American history, I've always just been like, how could there not be that much like diversity yet? Like, there's so many, like immigrants for like literally a century and a half where they're in our society, they are society, and they're not breaking through like the industry, like um I've always like I've always like wondered why that was, ever since like trying to break in too. And it wasn't until like as I was going through it, like through my career where I just noticed like, oh, no one wants to uplift these other creators, like it's because they're not like a culture fit. That's like my biggest thing. Hearing that.
Oh, culture fit. What a word.
And then
what a phrase.
And it's like, definitely there's also something that are, I wouldn't, not necessarily unique, that might not be the right word, but I feel that in each category of people that the US likes to break it down as, literally like Black, Hispanic, and then Asian and Pacific Islander, like even using those categories are like problematic where you're just lumping people in these categories, and then like everyone somehow becomes a token, right? And then of like that representation, like I don't represent all of like Asian Americans. I come from like a way different background than probably the other Asian American in like the studio, and I might end up being more similar to like the like of someone of a different ethnicity, right? And we might align there. And as I was going through my career and noticing that like I'm just automatically lumped with like the other Asian American, they might not even be Chinese, they could be Korean, and then
and they're just like any Asian, like here you go, you know them now. It's like, yeah, from the same country, like what is happening?
And so like from that exterior set set of experiences, that's also partially why one thing is that like I stuck mainly to environment art, because for instance I would like to paint more Asian people, but then I felt that this is early on, I'm not saying this is now, but that those early observations have still like sat with me even now, where when I was painting more Asian, when I was painting more characters, I should say, and they were more Asian like, and that turned into white people calling it anime like. All right, hot. I know that's hot to say, but I'm just gonna say it. It just happens that like the certain people that would be like, this isn't like, this doesn't look right, this looks anime, and I'm like, you're saying that because I'm Asian? Like, I'm sorry, but Greek art also doesn't look right either if you really think about it. They like to really emphasize certain features, just saying. But like I get that, and then I was like, oh, then I don't want to paint characters then. Like either I get the wrong crowd of like men who just want to like ogle Asian women, and like if I paint an Asian woman, or I get like just not necessarily insulted, but obviously like disapproved of the fact that my light-skinned character just isn't Anglo-Saxon enough. Like that's basically it. It's just not quite enough. And so like having those early interactions with like my art, and that I never really tied it to race and racism per se, like just that's like microaggression, not really understanding that, and having only recognized it now, like I feel like to me that was like, oh, I don't understand why I had to listen to them. I could have just embraced it. Like, you know, why did I have to shy away from it when I could have, all this time I could have been practicing how to paint or illustrate like Asian peoples. Like, I'm not saying Chinese obviously, or you know, specifically, but like all sorts, you know, because I want to be more representative in my art. You know, I personally, like, I had this moment, especially like it was late, like not late last year, but like late, like 2 years ago, where I was like drawing this character, and I realized, like, you know, one, I made her light skin, and two, I made her blonde, and I was just like, why did I do that? Like when I saw like the end of like 5 illustrations of them, like, why did I do that? And then that year of like kind of like rummaging it through my head, just like that was just like, I thought of fairy tales, and when I thought of fairy tales, I thought of European like art, and when I thought European art, obviously, you know, like that was the imagery that was in my head. I think all of those, especially early on, conversations, especially having been influenced by all that, I would say negative talk, you know, like where you were hearing people who didn't really care about diversity give you critique, that still affects my work now in terms of characters. And so so we're talking about like experience and whatnot. Obviously this is like a net negative, but I'm glad that, you know, especially throughout the years and being around more progressive people, that like I'm taking that as a learning experience and doing, you know, better, where I'm like, I do want that to be part of my, you know, art. I do want to focus on diversity, and that's very important. It's not just like it's not just like I have to represent like certain peoples, but it's doing the best I can to make sure that everyone can see, you know, like I'm making art for everyone. Even if that might be impossible, but you know, that's still something nice to have. And I think like for me, I definitely wish I could paint more like Asian faces, like Asian, and not shy away from it, because I feel like there's a lot of people that take that out of context, especially like that, like it looks too anime. That cuts a little, yeah, that was just like, I think every artist like who at least have drawn anime has heard that, and that just has like negatively impacted you know, their art career at a certain point. I just feel that like that was like my like cling to like, oh, I'm drawing like a person that I kind of like represent, or like I kind of look like being anime, and then somebody just being like, that's just not right. I'm like, how is that not right? What does right even mean?
Yeah.
You know, and of course this is all like early on stuff, like even, you know, breaking in. This is at the point when I was like still trying to break it, and that was and you know, that being years ago. I think things are much better now, but definitely also as an artist in the community that I would fight against. I am with, you know, like I can finally have a voice in saying that, like, you know what, don't listen to those people. They're old.
Yeah.
They're making games that you really, or games or you know, projects that are a little off key, and you don't have to be a part of that. You can carve out your own thing elsewhere. Just don't be afraid to be you. Paint everything that you want under the sun. Granted, it's not hate speech or something bad. not endorsing that at all whatsoever, right? But you know what I mean, where it's just like you, if you create the work, that's how you set yourself up for you know, the acknowledgement and, you know, being noticed. But yeah, I feel that was a little winded, but you know, yeah, I can't say that like yeah, I had a fairly good time just like painfully smiling through every one of those micro like aggressive like I don't want to be, I'm not, and you know, that's the other thing. I would say most people don't want to be singled out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you do not want to be the one who puts the fight on, because obviously that's, I don't want to say it's a target on your back, but it's gonna set up the expectation where it's gonna be your responsibility to put up the fight.
Yeah.
And at times it just feels like a fight.
And unfortunately, sometimes it does put a target on your back, especially
Yeah.
if you're a minority
Yeah.
or a woman or both. So, you know, like, because my experience with it too has been, because I've often been the only Black woman in the space, it's often fallen to me to have to represent for my entire race, even though that's not something that I should or want to be doing. And I didn't really have a choice, because everybody would turn to me when anything about diversity would come up and be like, well, Lauren, what do you think? Like, how should we represent this? Can you read this thing and let me know if it makes sense? Or can you look at this thing and let us know if you're, you know, and I'm just like, I am one person and I am not perfect. If I miss something, it doesn't fall on me that you got it wrong. Like, it falls on the company for not hiring any more people who look like me in the first place, because I should not be the only one in the room who can speak to this issue. And it needs to be something that, like, you know, like, if you're making a piece of media that an audience that looks like everybody is going to consume, then you need to have a room that looks like everybody to make that piece of media. And so far in the game industry, up until this job that I have now, I haven't seen that. And now I work at a studio that's really small. It's about 24 like full-time people. And it is by far the most diverse place I've ever been in, because most of the people are people of color. And a lot of the demographic is also women, and they're all from different backgrounds. And so we're making a game that's like dedicated to being diverse. And I truly believe that we're going to make it look authentic, because it's literally the people creating that game, making those decisions, who are making this game for everybody who looks like us. And the rarity of that is unbelievable, because I've had a career up to, you know, it's been 11 years since I started my career, and I haven't seen it until this job. Literally, this recording this episode is my first week. And so, you know, like, this industry is really suffering from a lack of having those voices, because like the amount of strain that it puts on people like me, or people who are just the only one in the room, is crazy. Because every day you get microaggressed, every day you get looked at being like, oh, like, what do they think? Or, you know, if I'm a Black woman, I'm like, you know, if I get angry at something, am I the angry Black woman? I've had to find very clever ways of navigating that space, speaking up without coming off as angry, and coming off as a reason, you know, having a reason argument. I have made sure that I have enough charisma and enough plan A's, plan B's, plan C's in order to properly handle something, so that I didn't have to come off as the angry Black woman. And that is called code switching, my friends. So that's what, unfortunately, is a necessary thing that we had to do in order to survive in a corporate industry that doesn't see us, because otherwise we get stereotyped, because the media that we consume stereotypes us. So it's really, really important to be able to see many more voices, to consume different stories from different authors, different creators, different artists, and to expand your library of what people could be in this world. Otherwise, you just put everybody in boxes, and then everybody has to deal with being stereotyped and microaggressed. And that's why so many people will leave the industry, especially people of color, because every day it's a death by 1,000 cuts. Like, you just can't deal with it anymore, and you just leave. And a lot of, like, you know, a lot of Black people, a lot of Black women especially, have been starting their own businesses, because they are realizing that they want to call the shots, and they want to build something up from scratch that doesn't come with that expectation of like, you have to be this one thing. And so, you know, like, I feel very lucky in my career, because the studio that I'm at now finally led me to a point where I can be myself and not have to be the only voice in the room. But that is, again, a very rare thing. And it's really hard for people who look like me in the industry. Not that I've ever worked with another Black woman on my dev team until now. So it's, the dearth is like unbelievable. It is changing, but what I want companies to be able to do is to acknowledge us, not when we're just in pain, and acknowledge us all the time. You know, Asian people, Black people, Hispanic people, everybody. And understanding that we always matter all the time, not just when it's a month, not just when it's, you know, a protest, not just when it's a disaster. We always matter. So always be looking to hire diverse talent, always be looking to source elsewhere aside from the few schools that you source. Always be doing that effort. And in corporate, you don't really see that because it's so hard. It's so hard to do it. And it's just, it takes so many resources. And it's like, oh man, like nobody's applying to this. You're not looking in the right places.
Yeah.
That's why nobody's applying. You're searching in the wrong places in the first place. That's why you don't get diverse talent. You're not being creative enough. You're not being creative like we've had to be in this industry in order to stay in it.
Yeah,
Take one bit of that effort and try. Sorry, the salt is real today, but I'm laying it out.
I will say this. That's the thing where I think, like, you know, like even like comprehending diversity, like from artists and from like the hiring / studio side, if you're the one who's looking for diverse talent, and if you are the diverse talent, diversity is not a collect them all.
Yeah.
That's just
It
not.
really isn't.
It's not like, okay, I will find a Black person, but then like no, I gotta find like a Black person who's from America, a Black person who's from like England, and then like a Hispanic person, but they must be like Mexican. They have to be Colombian. It's like we're not. You're also approaching it.
We're not Pokemon.
Yeah.
Like that. Like, you know, diversity is inattention. Or you know, like it. You're trying to find all people of different backgrounds, right? And that includes everything about their upbringing, like where they were born, if they were an immigrant, the color of their skin, like the economic class that they're in. It's not supposed to be some list, you know?
Yeah.
So, like, I think that there's, it's not Pokemon, and that we're not like labels. We're not a collection of labels.
Yeah.
Like, that's not what makes up our diversity. Like, literally the labels.
No one person is a monolith for anybody.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. No, you're so right. It's like they're just it's like we're people. We're employees just like everyone else. Like if no one else has to jump through these hoops, why do we? You know? And same with like there's always this justification, like, why do you paint the things you do? It feels like very exoticizing, which is kind of interesting that it just, and I think that that's part of the, you know, the when there's a pendulum swing, there's this awkward phase too, where there's a growing pains part. And I think that's the part we're in right now, where there's a lot of things that just, you know, they're trying to do it for the right reasons, but there's still a lot of, like you're saying, microaggressions or awkward things that we all have to deal with in order for them to fit that target. I guess just up until now, it sort of felt like an algorithm that sort of favors one very narrow slice of the population. And recently it's sort of been somewhat expanded that yes, all our other perspectives are also just as valid. But before, it didn't matter how hard we worked or how good our work was, it just wasn't going to be seen, or it wasn't going to reach a wide audience. It wasn't going to be accepted or given value. And that's the part where we're at, which is exciting that that's sort of expanding, but there's still work to be done. And in fantasy too, you know, it's just like, I think for the longest time, we kind of have an idea of what fantasy is that's very dated, right? And every time someone creates something new, it has to somewhat fit into that. And so it just feels like people are hesitant to expand that more into all the possibilities you mentioned at the top of this conversation, Lauren. And I think we're slowly getting there, especially like in publishing, there's a lot more diverse fantasy happening, but films need to catch up, you know, and there's a lot of industries that need to catch up. And that's, you know, the next step that I'm excited about seeing.
Just remember thinking about the Miles Morales Spider-Man game for the PS5 and how people were like, no, that's DLC content. That's not going to be a full game. Nobody wants that. Like the chat, the comments, like thousands and thousands of comments. Then people like getting all offended. Wait, that's a whole game? Wait, no, that's like, is Peter Parker even in it? Where's the white guy? Like people like waving their hands in the air, like losing their whole minds. Like, let me get this straight. You've made a whole game around the black kid? Like what? Like not to like completely forgetting that the movie swept every damn award, right? While the game was being made, they were like, oh, sweet, we got a cash flow here, right? The audience is like, wait, that can't be for real, right? That's DLC. That's DLC. That can't be a real game. Holy shit.
Yeah.
That's the audience, right? Registered voters. They're like, no. Like, No,
They're like,
that
no, we can't see this.
we can't see this. I'm
You
not
can't possibly focus on an inner city, Black Hispanic kid.
in New York City.
In New
New
York
York City.
He can speak Spanish. No, he can't. What is
Right?
this?
Like what kind of anomaly is that? Right?
Yeah, seriously.
No, the game doesn't take place in like Greece or Sweden or some shit.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
this is
And the
New
reason-
York City.
And the reason why people feel like it's so impossible is because up to this point, it was impossible. Like up to this point, we wouldn't see that even maybe even like, 10 years ago,
Right.
we wouldn't get a movie like that. Black
Right.
Panther, same deal. Like just like getting movies that look like that are not just about like the Black experience, but just about somebody trying to be a hero.
Right.
Somebody
Just
with awesome
having an
powers trying to
adventure.
be a hero.
Just having an adventure. If you want to throw some undertone in there of
Yeah, like you get to touch the culture. The
can
culture
touch-
obviously affects it,
right.
but it
But-
gives it so much more energy and flavor because you're this is the culture that they grew up in, so it affects everything. But the main goal of the movie is to still tell this classic story, and I think that's what's so special about it.
And I love what you said. We matter. We all matter, not just when we're in pain, not just when we're protesting,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
that's the important part of it. Like, because there's so many people that woke up to like, what are they complaining about? Oh, that. Oh,
Yeah, and it felt like
Right.
in 2020 they finally saw what we were complaining about.
right. And that's like the frustrating. Like, well, that's not me. It's not my life. What do I got? What do I care? Right? What do I care? That's what it felt like to me. Like that was the general feeling from the planet. It was, well, that's not us. Like, okay, there's that Black Pain movie, but that's not, what do I care? Right? Then you get to watch it on TV
In
you
real
know,
time, and
in
be
real
like,
time,
oh, this
then
is
go,
a real
oh,
thing.
oh, that happens to people? I thought that was just in the textbooks.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, the
No.
gaslighting. But but what I will say is with this wave that happened in 2020, I think it definitely caught and kept a lot more people than were previously on board to help fight the struggle. And so like
Yeah.
if I can be a little optimistic for a moment, like I do think that because of that, like just for all forms of, like acknowledgement, diversity. I know it's a loaded word, diversity, because it catches all so many different groups of people and also kind of minimizes it too. So I just want to address that as well. Want to make sure that everybody is being considered here, that other people do need to be considered, and that, like companies really are making the effort, even as awkward and, fumbling as it is, they are making the effort, and, people are trying to change what they're seeing. It's going to take a while, but I think the first step was acknowledgement. And so I do feel more confident that we're going to start to see more rapid change. It's still going to be slow, and it's still always work to be done. But at the very least, I have seen the shift happening, and, like just active kind of like intention towards getting more people into the industries, or seeing more people in the industry. And also like Twitter hashtags have been helping too. Like we've had Ava Heiferd on the show who started the Drawing While Black hashtag on Twitter. And there's another one, IMPOC in Play. There's many different hashtags that like are allowing people to come to the forefront and being able to show off their work and saying like, hey, my stuff is out here. Y'all were saying I don't exist, but here I am right here in front of your face. You want to hire me or not? And so I think that wave of awareness has at least started to change things a lot for the better. But I hope that places will start to see us, just generally see us, not just when we were begging and screaming to be heard, but just that we're here sharing the space with everybody else. So that's what I hope for. And so like I'm glad that things are changing, but yeah, we have a lot of room to grow. And I know that like I also get these questions from many different people though of like, well, what can I do? Like I'm not from a marginalized community, or I'm a man, or I'm white, or I'm not in the LGBT community. Like what can I do? Like how can I show my support? So what would be the advice that you would give to people to help the cause and show support and make change? that are like maybe even not in the community?
I would say buy people's work, like seek out more underrepresented artists, buy their work. If you don't have money to buy stuff, buy their art or books or whatever, tweet about it, share about it, credit them, like get the word out. If you see job listings and someone, recommend them for the position. Like honestly, at the end of the day, money in their pockets is how you get more creators getting to say the things they want to say and make the art they want to make. But I think that that's not it's not talked about enough, I guess, that it's just that is that simple thing you can do, is just share the work that you really like and seek it out. Like I said earlier, that is just look at your reading list and maybe try to introduce other, points of view into that reading list if it's all from one part of the world, same with your news sources, where you get your news from. Make sure that I'm hoping that we're all trying to go towards more global community, and that's why we talk about this so much, and it is so important. It's not just, I think a lot of people tend to reduce these discussions to just politics, but it's like we all live together, we want to work together, and this is how you do it. It's just making sure that there's different points of view just in your daily life if you don't actually live around other people that don't look like you.
Yeah, sharing the work, I think, is more important than anything, because if there are art directors or companies that aren't going to take the effort to look up diverse talent, they're going to have it cramped in their face when they go on social media from people that tag or make an entire reel or whatever, a slideshow, whatever they want to do of art that doesn't look like something that an art director would normally see. But it also normalizes it. Yeah. So that it's not like, oh, this is jarring. Like, okay, well, when are you going to get back to painting your cute Swedish elves and stuff? Like, why are you shoving black art in my face? Like, normalize it. Let people know that this stuff exists. To your thousands and thousands of fans or followers. Not just when something horrific happens in the news and you want to, what is that term? Performative allyship?
Yep.
Is that what it's called?
That's the one.
Yeah. Like, I'm with you for today.
Building on that, that's, I think, the most solid advice is to really like share like diverse art. When Drawing While Black is hashtagging on Twitter, don't just look at it like, oh, it's not my Twitter. It's like, come on, it's literally meant for exposure, to bring art that you probably wouldn't be able to find unless, because through algorithm, right? This hashtag is using that algorithm, and then share that art, because it's not just about like supporting, right, your fellow artists and community. It's that like you as an individual, like, or actually not you, an individual artist may not have the authenticity to create that art. Like, I'm sorry to say that, like, it just, that's a reality, because then you could be appropriating cultures and other people's experiences, and like you don't have to be of certain ethnicities to almost always do that. But at the same time, it's like, I probably would not, like, unless it was for a job and like I had an art director and all the resources to direct me on how to develop like maybe some historic like African like culture design, unless I had all the resources and that art director to help guide me, I probably wouldn't do that on like my personal art, because I think I would take things out of context because I don't understand, I don't have the resources to understand. But I acknowledge that, right? And I think artists therefore need to acknowledge that and not base off of media stereotypes, right? As Lauren and Mia have said, and instead uplift those that actually have the authenticity and experience to tell those stories or like depict those moments in art. Like, this isn't like just like, oh, let me make a fantasy world where like it's like Southeast Asia or whatnot. It's not like just changing the skin tone. I think like that's also another step where it's more visual diversity, but then on the more complicated and more on a deeper layer of that authenticity, you have to share that art. That it's literally not your story. You cannot say it. You cannot tell it. Right. So therefore, follow these hashtags. Look at there's also like Southeast Asian artists like SCA art artists.
That's what it's
There's
called. Yeah.
there's the Trans Day of Visibility, or is that one?
Yeah, Trans Day of Visibility is one of them.
Yeah, and multiple like visibility, like vibrant art. There's also there's so many art hashtags that's like it's there. It literally pops up like every few months, sometimes a little more often, depending I think on what Twitter feels like that year. But it's there, and share that art. Also get used to sharing that art. Like it's just get used to seeing that, hey, this is like there's a whole environment outside of literally me and my computer screen.
And I've talked about it in our early episodes, but I physically wouldn't be where I am right now, working with the companies that I'm working with right now, had somebody not shared the work that I was passionate about.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it was stuff that no art director was ever going to ask me to do. And that's what we're talking about. Like, you could literally change somebody's life by saying, hey, Twitter, with my thousands and thousands of followers, check out this person's stuff. Hashtag blah, 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 blah. And then somebody sees that and says, oh my God, this is exactly who we need. This is what we've been looking for. Call them immediately. Thank you, Lois, or whoever the artist is. Thank you for posting this, because now we know who we want for this big time job. Oh my God, you've just changed somebody's life. Done.
Yeah. And I will say that
normalize it the way you would taking pictures of your food or your cat or your studio or your flowers that you picked up over the weekend that you had to tell everybody about on social media. Normalize it like that, right?
Yeah. Ingrain it into your habit, your daily habit, your ritual. It's like, when you look up art that you enjoy or that you like, or as you come across things, expand your repertoire, see who else could be out there, consume different kinds of content and media, and then share that content and media with other people. Because I will say directly, it's affected me too, where, speaking of Lois, she did share one of my Drawing While Black posts, and it got that post went viral because she shared it. And I think that was the one that might have led to, I think Blizzard had reached out to me, and then that recruiter from Blizzard left the studio, went to this studio that I work at currently, and reached out to me. So it was directly affected my life. So we don't say it lightly when we say share somebody's work. It could change their life. It literally could. And I am a living, breathing example of that. So
she rolled that snowball right down the mountain, just like in a cartoon.
And
shit just happens after that.
Like a Katamari ball.
That's right. That's right. Living it.
And that's the other thing too, where I think normalizing sharing also helps stop seeing everyone as like a direct competition. Like I feel like there's a correlation there, and it's like, look, just share the art. Your art journey is your art journey, and so is like theirs. But like that authenticity and the story that they tell, it's their art, and where they come from is not your art's competition or where your art is coming from too. The more we uplift diversity, the more like everyone's like stories will stand out or start standing out, and that's overall better for the entire community, like otherwise, do you also like, as the the artist, do you also just want to only like exist in an echo chamber? Like, no, I think it's especially I think that especially like it's now, I would say there's a lot more art than I remember us starting out, right? There's more reason to really uplift different and diverse art, and all of it is to then also quell this like an anxiety that everyone's competition. It's like, no, like
diversity and empathy directly correlates with that too.
Absolutely.
Understanding other people's lived experience and wanting to celebrate it rather than hide it in the shadows.
Yeah. Like, I know that that's also not necessarily like direct art advice, but this is also the soft skills
Yeah.
that, like it starts off with, especially now, literally now, being in a pandemic where you can't meet people in person, your online interactions might start mattering. I wonder.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
This world is small, y'all.
Yeah.
This is a tiny, tiny world that we're in, and you never know who's going to crop up again. So you better treat them right when you come across them.
Absolutely. I did want to give a slight counterpoint to what you were saying earlier, Esther, about and part of it is obviously because the story I'm telling is not from my background at all, but I think that is another slice of it where it's like, I mean, I'm doing that very carefully, and also doing it in a fantasy world where I'm not representing anyone's particular background. It's a made-up world and all that kind of stuff, but there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. And I think there's the other side of it too. It's like, unfortunately, we all are minorities still. And if everyone did just tell only their stories, we would have a majority of white stories and white male stories. That would just be the fact. So if we do want more diversity, we have to at some point learn to tell each other's stories and do them with the same humanity that we tell our own. And it is incredibly hard to do. And we will all make mistakes at it. But I guess to me, the advice I would give to people is, don't do that stuff because you feel like you should. Do it because you're very passionate about it, and because you love the subject and who you're portraying and whatever it is, and that you have something to say. That, I guess, the compass I have, there's no right way to do it, but for me it's just that I don't have all the answers, and that I always look to people from the community that I'm representing for in terms of making sure that I have enough input and that sort of thing. And anyway, it's like, it could be a completely different subject, but I guess what I'm saying is, I hope we can get to the point where we are with at least men writing female characters now is so much better than it was 50 years ago.
That's
and
true.
That didn't happen because they stopped. It happened because they learned how to get better at it. And obviously women telling stories about women is always going to be like more authentic, but it can still be done from someone who doesn't share that experience. If you're writing that character as a character, not a certain object, I guess, or
without putting them in a box.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess that's what I would want to see, is that we can get to a point that we can all make art and tell stories about each other without it feeling so contentious, because we are just interested in each other as people. But if you know about yourself that you can't do that faithfully, definitely pass the ball to somebody else who can do it right. And I think takes responsibility too. A lot of people up until now have unfortunately done appropriation where they take ownership of something and take it for themselves instead of acknowledging the people who actually made that beautiful thing. And I think that's the part that we're hopefully changing in the future when it comes to that stuff. But anyway.
And case in point, I'm actually working on a story right now with a Mexican coded main character, and I'm working with a Mexican writer to characterize this person and make sure that his voice is authentic, so that I can represent him the best way, I can. And that's through just assistance with somebody who was willing and happy to help me in the community. And through that collaboration, we can tell, much more colorful stories and diverse stories. So I don't think that has to be limited to just, one, if I'm Black, I can only tell Black stories, or, if I'm, whatever, I can only tell those stories. I think that it's very limiting for the person and for each other, but you do have to make sure that you approach it with a lot of respect, and you do have to make sure you do your research. And if you can, talk to people who have the energy to talk to you in the community, because it's not on them to give you advice all the time, just know that. But if they are willing to give you advice and they are willing to help you, and hopefully you should be paying them for their time, you can make a story that is characterized well, and that represents the culture well and respects the culture well that you're trying to represent. So there's by no means that channel has to be closed, but just do it carefully and do it considerably. So that's definitely what I would say too. So I agree with that point, Mia, because I am an example of that now. I'm telling my own story, but it's still not a point of view that's my own. But I can't always write from a point of view that's my own. So I
take that place. I do want to say then, a footnote to what I mean is that if you do tell a different story, right, that has to be a collaborative effort, or at least you have to also make that intention, because you're not sorting or citing it from yourself or your own experiences, right? It does involve someone else. And I think that is important, where like we do want to elevate stories and different and have diverse collaborations, right? But again, that's the emphasis on the collaboration, right? You definitely have to take responsibility. Otherwise, if you don't, it's painful. It's painful for everyone involved.
A lot of people have gotten canceled for it, y'all.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, and I think anyone should be able to write and create anything, but at the same time, you also have the right to be criticized for it, and the audience will call that stuff out now. And I think that that's important, because it's like, it used to be that, no one really got to react if it didn't really represent them, but now everyone does. And so do that at your own risk, like take that risk, and know that you will get criticism for it. And don't be, if you get criticism for it, be humble about it. It's like, it's not your culture, that's the least you can do, is just at least want to learn from that experience. But yeah.
It's like, sometimes you got to take the L and ask what I did wrong, and be authentic about wanting to learn how to do better, and move on and make another story that is better than the one you did before. Nobody's going to be perfect. The thing is that everybody is learning about how to interact with each other properly, especially as we're so much more connected than we have been ever before. And there's a lot of speed bumps and stumbling blocks and fails completely. And, just be kind to each other, and assume that not everybody is out to be horrible and be disrespectful. Some people genuinely are, and they're just jerks. Like, we don't give them any attention. But for the ones who are really trying, like, screaming at them and yelling at them and pretending like they are the worst person in the world trying to kill somebody is not really the way to go about it either. So, that attack will, like, a lot of times prevent people who we honestly should be working with to make things better from wanting to try anymore, because they're just like, well, I tried and no one's listening. And again, it's not our responsibility to get people to like want to change themselves, but for the people who do have the time and the energy to try to have a positive dialogue, it's good to have that dialogue. I think you don't have to have it, but if you have the energy and time, it's nice to have it. So I used to be definitely one of those people who were like, I want to jump in and make sure that I want to change their mind. You can't always do that. I'm tired, y'all. This is how I choose to change y'all's mind now. To be on this platform with y'all, here, and to spread the word that way. And that's also the advice that I would give to people wanting to change and wanting to understand, is just consume content like this, where we've made it for you, so that you don't have to bother your friend who's like, running their own business. And you're like, how do I represent Black people? Like, no, like, just maybe listen to some content and like listen to Black people who know how to already do it and are giving advice about it. Or listen to Asian people who are giving advice about it, or saying how not to microaggress them, or saying how not to badly represent them. Like, there's platforms that have been made for this already. There's a lot of resources out there. So maybe research and study and get yourself a little bit more educated, so you're not ignorant, so you don't say the bad thing to a person and offend them, and make them feel like you're not in their corner. So try to do your best to educate yourself, and we'll all be okay. We'll all be better for it. I'm also needing to educate myself about many different things too. So, it's not just limited to one set of people. It's limited. It's to everybody to do that. And we'll have a more empathetic world that way. All right. Is there anything that we want to leave our audiences with before we adjourn for Vertex 2022?
Tell them where to follow us on Instagram.
That's right. Where to follow us. Follow us on Instagram, Painted in Color on Instagram. We have the Painted in Color podcast discussion group on Facebook. So if you are interested in joining the conversation and having a dialogue with us and with other people who watch the show, join that group and feel free to jump in to conversation. That would be wonderful. Follow us on Twitter, The Pick Podcast. Follow us on Instagram, again, Painted in Color. And, keep looking out for more content. We post every other Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific time and 1 p.m. Eastern. So go ahead and subscribe to our show on YouTube. Smash that like button and leave a comment and let us know how you liked the episode. Don't laugh. Esther's like, I'm not with her.
Smash it. You gotta smash that. Smash that like button.
We're not editing this out. This is gonna stay in the episode, Esther. So you're gonna have to deal with it.
Smash it.
No, seriously, but if
Okay.
you like, if you like what we do, please subscribe and follow us for more content because we're trying to spread the word about the show. And also, if you have any more guests, artists that you like that you think would be a good fit to have be interviewed on the show, we'd love to hear the suggestions. So please give us your recommendations in the comments and in our messages, wherever you want to. But looking forward to seeing you soon. Thank you so much for joining us and hope you have a wonderful time at Vertex. Bye, y'all.